Yo, welcome to the 90s. So I've been excited to get to this era because this is the era in which I remember most and care the most about comics. I grew up in the 80s as a kid, but then in the 90s when you hit in those teenage years and comics become the most popular thing. Go and look at this shirt. So this thing's gigantic. This is Echo Gear. This shirt might be worth some. And I'm sure my hat doesn't work, but things get a little darker too. So the 90s is a different time as far as compared to It's Morning in America again, which is what the 80s was. They were trying to bring back the nostalgia of the 50s when they were kind of coming back there in the 80s. That's what Reaganomics is trying to bring on in. So now the 90s is here, and Generation X is really a bit bitter, right? And things are maturing fast. As much as there is on Friday night, Steve Urkel and all the sitcoms that are adorable and G-rated and have a very special episode of Home Improvement and all that stuff. There is a movement toward like more, let's act real. Roseanne was one. That's why she just had a big comeback. Married to Children was one. Fox being the example of a network that is like, we're going to be a little more racy, and everyone else is still trying to toe the line of what a sitcom is, like Big Bang Theory. Like that's still using a laugh track. It's finally over. Thank goodness. Because a lot of us in the nerdier culture, they don't like Big Bang Theory. Like a lot of nerd kids don't like Big Bang Theory. I laughed a lot of seasons of it, but they are really ridiculing like nerds in a way. It is that. It's a lot of that. But with the 90s, like I've always been bringing up gangster rap. I love saying that. Gangster rap is a different type of rap where they are saying, it's NWA and it's F the Police. Like that's a hit. And it's just like amazing. So it's got a lot of attitude, a lot of angry young black youth is rising up and just being like, yeah, what the heck? Like what's going on? And just talking about it and singing about it, making a big deal. Gangs are a big problem. You'll all know the famous Rodney King thing that happens where it's cops beating up this black man. And that was the first that happens. And now we just saw, oh, you mean it's every day where everyone's filming these days. It's like, oh, there's more. That was once an isolated incident to America, where why can't we all just get along becomes like a parody when it's a sad cry for help, isn't it? So that's still the world. The world's rough. I've been bringing this up how wrestling gets rough, because we got to be more real. Society wanted to be just real, whatever that is, okay? Some of that is The Matrix, when The Matrix comes out, because it's just about grounding things. People don't like playing pretend anymore. And wrestling is like, all right, here's how we're producing wrestling. Here's how comics are going to act. Let's get rid of spandex later on. Let's get rid of that. And everyone's just wearing black leather. That's the black leather craze that you see with superheroes, where they all wear these black leather outfits. That did not used to exist. That's the Matrix. That's because of that, where they took off the costumes. Like, we're all just going to dress like this now. And again, that's later 90s. I've been going on about how much I love the 90s designs of comics. And because they're trying to be edgy and trying to be in your face, and that's so much of it. The attitude eyebrow that all cartoon characters have on those video game packages and selling you, some sort of drink. It's all like, yeah, on a skateboard, one eye up, one, not. The only one that can do that is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, okay? Let's all know that. And this is when he starts to rise too, right? Because wrestling mimics what's going on in the world. So one day, Vince McMahon, owner of wrestling, just comes out on the show and says, we've been doing it this way for this long, but now I think we need to insert a little more attitude. And they started being more adult. They started using real names. It gets more sex, more violence. They're copying ECW because that was a smaller organization that proved like people are ready for more adult entertainment in their wrestling. Again, another group of fans now like, hey, we're 18 and stuff. We don't want to watch a guy pretending to be a milkman and he's a wrestler too. And say your prayers and eat your vitamins and all that stuff that Hulk Hogan's spouting. Hulk Hogan turns into a bad guy. And it's a big deal. It is to them. They can't believe that he's a villain. Up until when does he come back? WrestleMania 18, he's still a villain. He then remains a villain for quite some time, historically. I think he turns good again in WCW, but no one really, by then things are petering out. Because this wrestling thing, is a bit of a fad. It's a bubble that fits this generation's attitude for a time. And we all know we're going to crash into a wall later with that when 9/11 happens and everything kind of goes, whoa, let's rein it in. All right. So that's just some of what society is like as I'm talking about all that. Comics try to follow suit. TV's following suit. Everyone's trying to add attitude. and just add like, yeah, I'm a rebel, like all that baloney, of being extreme. Okay, that's what it is with X's and just Mountain Dew. That sort of attitude starts in the 90s, right? So it's a cultural shift across the board, all entertainment. And comics are no different. So comics start to get more violent as we get to the end of the 80s. You remember the last video? We're getting more violent. Batman's more grounded and real. The Watchmen are more grounded and real. We're going to try and now mimic that in our comics, in our Marvel comics, in our DC comics. We're going to ground our characters and make them more real and try to do that, and then make them more extreme looking with those outfits, trying to get attention, trying to sell a book to kids, trying to now sell a book to people that grew up, but now they still fall for the thing like baseball cards, even though some baseball cards are worth money. Collectibles are often not. When they're selling you something that has the word collectible on it, they made enough for everybody to buy it, and that means everyone's going to have it. Collectibles are things that are scarce and rare. People used to trade comics. That dime for a comic meant you were going to read 5 to 10 different comics. You could trade those comics around. That's the idea. The whole thing with baseball cards, they used to be disposable. That's why there wasn't many left. Kids back then, the concept of keeping things and collecting them, it was just, oh, this is just garbage, we're done. Like, do you keep magazines? Do you keep newspapers? You don't. The feeling people had about comics and about baseball cards was exactly that of a newspaper. That's why things are scarce now. And then people market into that. The bubble of baseball cards is huge at the time, which goes hand in hand with comics, because you have these card shops. Well, we'll sell comics and cards, because also nerd cards start to get in there. And I don't mean to say it like that. Remember, I use nerd like a good word, but that's your Magic the Gathering, your Pokemon stuff, your battling game cards. When you have game cards and you go meet and you join leagues and you have, it's awesome when that starts to really take hold and change what cards are, as opposed to just a collectible thing of it. Just here's a still image and here's the thing, you know what cards are, because I love that project. I love this project. But that's the thing, is that these characters are now all getting this treatment of, well, let's make them extreme, right? And one of the most extreme things that happens is, let's just start talking about comics, and we're going to talk about the Man of Steel. The Man of Steel #1, actually the first variant comic, so that's when we start that, and I'm going to do that at the end. All the different types of comic covers and gimmicks and the things that they were selling to children. That's what I'm going to get to by, like, you can put anything on here and sell it to children, not just children now, the adult collector that believes, yes, this is going to be worth something because Superman's dying. I'm going to put my kid through college because I'm going to keep this. Ridiculous, right? It came in a poly bag. That means it's a sealed bag. So even to look at the comic, you got to open this up. In that bag, you got some like stamps, like lickable stamps, so not quite stickers, right, of some characters. You got the comic book, and you got a card that was his tombstone, I believe. And you got the most important thing of all, the black armband that everybody wore, right? I remember going to school on the day Superman died. I remember some people had gone to stores at midnight and they had gotten it. And by the time I got out of school, someone sold it to my mom for $10. I had to pay $10 for it. Isn't that crazy? And I'm sure that guy, then the next people that walked in, yeah, there's only 1 or 2 left. You know, that's just what it is. That's supply and demand. It's just fascinating to watch things go viral like that, especially back then. So they announced that Superman's going to die. I knew nothing of comics at this point, by the way. This is what gets me into comics. This pinnacle moment of Superman dying, I'm like, what? And now it's time for me to start collecting comics and figure out how it works. New comics come out on Wednesdays every week. That's when they come out. You go to the comic store on Wednesdays. Here's your new pulls. There they are. Some comics are weekly, but they are weekly meaning it's Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, Peter Parker Spider-Man, and then every once in a while there's a 5th week, so they throw an annual Spider-Man or Spider-Man Mega Special or whatever those are, right? So that is some of how that works. Superman, the same thing. Now those 4 comics, 5 comics might have different stories in all of them because they're all different books, right? Not Superman. He's got 4 creative teams working on 4 different books telling one story. That's how they did it. They'd meet once a year, say, what's the plan this year for the Man of Steel? We're going to set it down and figure it out. And every year they would say, there was one of the guys, and I'll put his name here, that he would say, why don't we just kill him? Right? I think it was Jerry Ordway. No, is it? All right, I'm not going to fake it. Oh, is it Jerry Ordway? That's my guess, it's Jerry Ordway. So they go, because what they were going to do first, so he would always bring that up. How about we kill him? He'd just do that for years. It's like a joke, right? Because that was beyond belief. We can't kill Superman? Yeah, right. So what happens is they are going to marry him. I just told you about how Spider-Man got married. It was a big deal. So finally, Lois Lane's going to marry Clark Kent and Superman, and it's all hooray, right? And that's some of the generation I'm growing up in, going to the wedding. And then they go, oh, wait, no, you can't do that. Why can't we do that? Because Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, is on television on ABC, starring Dean Cain, right? That is a Superman show. It's a romantic comedy show that's kind of actiony, not much special effects, but we made it. It's a live action television show for Superman, which is great. You know, this is now post some of this new media is coming out. We've got comics and cartoons, comics and movies, but Superman comes back to television first before trying to remake it back to movies. He comes back to television in the 90s via this show. Terry Hatcher and Dean Cain. It's a hit. It lasts quite a long time. And there's sure some serious moments in it, but it's not quite as serious as the CW shows these days, where it is, you know, they can make some things happen. They have some budgets. So now they can't, oh, you can't do that because the media says this. Remember what I was saying? TV now says, oh, you have to do it this way. Movies now say, oh, they're going to look like this in movies and make them like that in the comic. Oh, this happened in the movie. They accidentally called the Hulk David Banner instead of Bruce Banner, I think somehow. So then they said, oh, that's his middle name, Bruce David Banner. So they start calling him that in the comics because of a screw up that was in the TV show or something. Like, that's fascinating that it would all... That screw up like changes history for it. The radio for Superman. Remember I told you the radio invents a lot of things for Superman. A ton of things for the Superman lore. Kryptonite, I believe. Probably, what was it? Kryptonite, some of his powers for sure. Maybe even Jimmy Olsen shows up on the radio. And then they just, bring him on in. So they announced that Superman's going to die. I knew nothing about Superman. It said, Great Caesar's ghost, Superman's going to die, right? Or Superman's dead. I go to my dad, I'm like, they're killing Superman. I think Caesar's ghost is killing him? Because I didn't know that. He goes, no, that was his boss's catchphrase. He goes, Great Caesar's ghost. Get out there and get the scoop, right? That's Perry White's catchphrase. So I'm not talking on this microphone. So that's Perry White's catchphrase. So I knew nothing, but I knew I needed to find out how do I get this story of Superman? Oh, it's taking place in these comics. Okay, when do they come out? They come out on Wednesdays. Oh, okay. Comics always come out on Wednesdays. Okay. I was going to card shows just randomly trying to figure it out. And I liked Spider-Man at this point, so I was randomly getting some stuff, but I hadn't figured out the system. And this is an agreed system in entertainment. New CDs come out on a certain day. New DVDs come out, I believe, is Tuesday. New something else comes out. Like, it's an agreement with media companies, and because they're all putting out different media, so they just figured, like, okay, we're going to make this our CD day, music fans on this day, DVD fans on this day. Things like that are actually in play. So what happens is I figure all this out, and I start collecting the comics. I'm reading them, obviously, on the edge of my seat for how this is going to go. They do a story leading up to this being shows up, and he's just carving a path of destruction. The Justice League tries to stop him, and it's a weak Justice League at this point. He just demolishes the Justice League. All right. And then it's obviously a threat that Superman himself is going to have to take on. As the comics are getting closer to this encounter, what they did was they made the panels bigger. Less panels on a page to make them bigger. So that for the big fight, it's just splash pages. Which is like good and bad because some people obviously complain it's not as much of a comic. But they tried to do this thing that's like boom, 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 these epics. And it's great. You know, but it is another gimmick to sell books. So the Superman story works. They make 4 new characters that claim the mantle of Superman. Those characters are still around to this day. Some of them villains, some of them heroes still. And some of them now, again, matched into these universes and all that. But they're around. But a year later, Superman returns. Right? That's what he does. He returns. Of course, he's going to return a year and so later. But that is a long time. Remember, something happened in comics for this long, 6 comics. That's 6 months, right? It's half a year. So a full year of him being gone, that's a whole year of life that it's different. It's pretty interesting. Wolverine loses his adamantium in this era. Magneto obviously is like, why don't I just pull this out of you? And just sucks all the adamantium out of him. Right? So now he's got bone claws. You don't know if he has claws for a while because it didn't pop him for a while. You find out he has bone claws. That's interesting. He devolves because of the not having the adamantium. It was supposed to be a 6-month story. It lasted 7 years. 7 years without his adamantium. Like this, that's It's ridiculous. I showed you what happens to Superman in that post. They make him Electric Superman later on as well for gimmick covers. So now Man of Steel's gone. Now he's an electric blue superhero that has all different powers. Like, what? It's ridiculous. Oh, started at number one again. Started at number one again. Anything to get people talking. It's gimmicks, right? And that term is in wrestling. It's your gimmick. So that is what they're trying to do to sell these books and get things done. And it is working. X-Men, number one, sells the most comics ever at the beginning of this boom. 8 million copies. Because the X-Men comic, actually that one comic has multiple covers, and when you put them all together, it equals one gigantic perfect image of them fighting Magneto. Jim Lee drew it, and it's gorgeous. And that connects together like a big picture, but they also sell one that unfolds, right? So they've made 6 different versions of this one story. And well, I want all 5 of those covers so they connect. And of course, I'm going to buy the other one with the gatefold cover. That's how it is. It's collectors. So everyone starts to sniff this out. Comics are growing and getting popular. They're starting to give you what you want to see. It's getting more mature, and the art is getting elevated. I showed you that Marvel Comics art in the 80s. They were still working like it's the 60s in a way, right? Like it's a character model. They start to advance that in the 80s and as people start to grow and change things. And then not only that, grow confident enough to change things. And when their boss is saying you can't do that, he's like, okay. And then he does it anyway. What's that guy gonna do? Go change 24 pages? You can't. Deadline's tomorrow. We got to send it to print. So we'd still do this stuff. Todd McFarlane would do that when he was told to tone down his famous spaghetti webbing. Right? Those books were selling because of Todd McFarlane. This is also an era when stories were not selling books as much as the art. You've got the bad girl era is going on here, the bodacious bad girls with the big boobs constantly, and they can arch their back like a alien, right? I mean, that's the thing. And that's, again, how many guys are buying comics compared to girls? We are probably at the lowest of women buying comics. And this is for guys. They are marketing toward guys because that's what it is. It's just all of that. And that's what's selling. It's ridiculous, right? Again, that really was the movement. And when you grow up in that era, you think, oh, this is how comics are. Always. You don't say, oh, this was a fad. Oh, look at that. We need to do this with all of the women characters because we need to treat people with equal rights, not like just physical specimens that we want to look at and even put out swimsuit issues of comic book characters that I own 3 of because I collected everything. They made so much. They made those like the cards. They were painted by the same people who did Marvel Masterpieces. And my favorite stories of the X-Men are when they're playing basketball. They do like a full event for something and they need like this issue's a break and then a new story starts. This is one where they're like, can you believe what just happened? Oh my goodness. But they're playing baseball and they're playing basketball. And it's just so fun. And then one of them uses their powers and then it turns into a fight, and they're almost the most wholesome issues of a comic where it is that. But that's again another 90s thing. Giant crossover events, as I was talking to you about. Continuity becomes a muck, even for Marvel now. So they feel they need to reset things. And it works. It does work. They try so many times to reset comic books to number one. And they're like, okay, it's been this long. We're going to go back to our old numbers because now we're hitting number 500, right? So now, all right, you're a new crop that's like, yeah, you collected one, but now it's actually number 500. But they're like, oh, great, because now it's a collector's issue, blah, blah. And then they phase out. And then, we're going to revamp Cap again. And then, now we're up to issue 600. We're going to make it 600 again because we want a fancy collage cover for Spider-Man, right? That is what it is. It's so many gimmicks. Let's talk about the gimmicks. Because again, Superman being the ultimate gimmick. And it did work. And again, I summed up Superman to a degree. It's like I could talk a whole video on Superman. But we're not here for that, right? It's a big deal when they kill him. It gets the world's attention. Remember, the Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man are the most recognized superheroes in the world. The Superman logo is one of the most recognized logos in the world, symbols in the world, besides Mickey Mouse, and I think it's Colonel Sanders or Coca-Cola or Nike. But one of those logos is just as famous, but Superman being like, it's the most recognized thing on planet Earth, right? And it means the same thing to everybody. Superman. That's the point. We go into, so I just want to really weigh how big it was that they did that. And I think that's what really kicks off a lot of this attitude era for comics too. Because if this is a world that's willing to get rid of Superman, and they say, I think Louise Simonson says, I think that Superman was too good for the world we were in at the time. And it's like, think of that. And by the way, Remember those crime statistics I showed you for the 70s? We're double that now for crime. And they're going to fix it in this same era. And Disney gets into Times Square and Toys R Us is in Times Square by the 2000s and stuff, but not there yet. It's all gritty, dirty, and murderous in New York. Still violent. Gangs, violence, lots of bad stuff. The president this time, obviously, we just went through Bush for one term now. After Reagan, okay, we get into some war stuff. Some of that lasts 3 weeks at first. Then that's Desert Storm. Then there's another one. And then that obviously lasts longer. That's where we get Saddam Hussein from, and him being so famous that we parody him as much as Hitler, okay? And he's a monster just as much as anybody else. Of course he is. But that happens. It's a quicker thing than we have to think, oh, we got those WMDs, right? And it turns out like we're there. That's a controversy later in the 2000s with W. Bush. Was we got those WMDs, we got to get them. That becomes the catchphrase for our reasoning for going there, where Saddam is. It's like, that's not who attacked us at 9/11. Well, we're going there, and we're getting them, because we got to get someone, apparently. It shows you some of this. We're going through the Clinton years right now. Remember, Clinton's big controversy is he gets, I'll use these. He gets fellatio, okay, and gets caught. So he's caught cheating on his wife, all right? And by caught, I mean, people know they set him up. She still had a stain on her dress or something, and people know this is a controversy. And did he lie under oath? That's what it's all about. It's nothing to do with what he did there. It's did he lie under oath? Okay? Clinton again, when that's going on, I'm thinking, is that when they take him out of the Animaniacs title? Because they get Clinton out of the Animaniacs title, like I showed you. He's in there playing the saxophone. That's how, like, oh, let's change this because this is gross, you know? So that was the big controversy there. Also, the O.J. Simpson trial is the big controversy as well. So you got these race relation issues. The world's looking at that like no one's ever looked at anything. Now a lot of people look at stuff like this these days. Things blow up. Things are out of hand. It's crazy how much, because of all the video and all the opportunities for things to spark attention. But back then, it's like everyone's attention is on this. The world's attention is on what we're putting on the TV. And what we're putting on the TV is on every channel, you know? So that was a big deal. So there's a lot of that going on. It's always anger. It's always a lot of race and always fighting for equality, right? We get some gay rights now in the 90s, as we were talking about. We brought up North Star finally comes out. Now it's years later, he finally gets married, right? That doesn't happen until the 2010s. I knew this video, by the way, was going to be kind of the this to that, this to that. Because this is 90s, right? This sets the precedent for how things kind of go to a point. You know, not the gimmick redos, but just comics grow up and they stay kind of grown up. We don't have to then revert back to child again. Now comics are for everyone because there's enough for everyone. I told you from when this class started, I like reading Marvel Adventures. That's the G-rated, PG-rated Spider-Man comic book for kids. And no one's getting murdered. It's the vultures robbing a bank. But man, this art's exquisite. Damn, Spider-Man's funny. You know, what a fun adventure. What a good episode of Spider-Man. Not he literally is like fighting for and suffering and horrible things happen to women. And sometimes you just want to read a fun thing. But now comics have gotten pretty grim, even to the fact of they made that part of continuity. I'll tell you that later. It goes back to what I was saying about continuity with the crossover to the Crisis, to then the Crisis to the other Infinity Crisis, to then all the crises. Now we're in another thing that is the bubble of all those crises, like I was telling you about, restarting everything again. And the theme is a super being from the Watchmen. I think I told you this, but I kept vague. He plucked out, I don't know if I told you this part, 10 years of time and a little bit of hope. He literally took hope out of the world, right? Because he saw this ideal world of Superman, of this, look at this, look how they treat this man, and it's all about truth, justice, the American way, all that stuff, and that meaning something good, and positivity and all that stuff. Let's make it more real. And they made it like a being did that in their actual universe, not an editor made that decision out here in the real world. And now what they're doing, they just wrapped that up because we want our comics to be a little more hopeful. So again, they make that part of the story. They don't just decide, hey, everyone, start writing Superman nicer. Start writing Batman a little more like this. They make it like, really? You took hope away from us and now we've got it back? I feel different as a cat. Like, yeah. So it's a meta-narrative, but it's also a mess in a way, you know, but they're cleaning it up. It's not the worst thing. Sometimes you got to do these reboots to get things back on on track. Because there's a comics bubble I'm telling you about that happens, right? Because all of this collectability, all of this stuff, just like Beanie Babies and just like the websites, there's a bubble, and then all these things go out of business, right? New companies started, then gone, right? One of them that lasts the whole time is Image Comics. Image Comics is the brainchild of 7 guys leave Marvel Comics, right? And possibly even some from DC, but they start Image Comics. It's a comics label that they only own the logo. You own your heroes. You own your property. You own it all. If I made a comic and it gets produced by Image, they don't own any of it to this day. That's what Image Comics does for the comics industry. They were then considered the third company for a while. Now you have a lot of different companies and you have Kickstarter, so it's different ratios now, but that's a big deal because it gives artists a lot of freedom, and comic artists start going to, big time names start going there because they're like, I'm going to produce a book for myself. I'm still going to work at Marvel doing this, but I'm going to produce a book for myself. So it's a really big deal that these, mavericks, it's a big word because they stood up to Marvel. They said, I quit because this book is selling because of me. And they're like, no, Spider-Man's selling because it's Spider-Man. That's not why Spider-Man jumped from 0, like really low sales in basic, to I think they sold 2 to 3 million with 1 or 2 variant covers, right? Just because Spider-Man looks so cool. Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man is different. They start drawing it in your face. They start exaggerating the proportions and the way people bend and the way they move. It works and it doesn't work, as I was talking about with the ladies, but it does also work with that fighting and with the muscles and with it. It is overblown. They are fictional, gigantic, ridiculous beings, right? They're super beings. So some of it is that, where they're so ridiculously buff or so ridiculously hot or whatever, all of that is indicative of the time where their sex sells. That's a big part of the 90s, is like sex sells, and they really do introduce that into a lot of what's going on, a lot of just adult content. All right, and I'm bouncing all over. All right, so Image Comics, let's stay with, so Image Comics, again, gives people a lot of that freedom and control to do what they want to do. And here's the thing, it doesn't last like it's, because it's an industry, they still know each other in this industry. It's still people working at a few different companies in an industry. That I wrote down a little of Jim Lee's timeline. Jim Lee is excellent. Right? His art is excellent. He does all that phenomenal X-Men art that does make that book shine. It's the art that starts to move these books more than writing. Right now, it's writing, and the art has to be up to snuff. But you can still not have as good art these days. The writing has to be so dynamic and good. And that's a change. That changes. That was a big thing when it's all about the art. So Jim Lee, he's working at Marvel for several years, gets in charge of the X-Men, does all these other books. They were going to give him another 3 set of books to work on. And he says no and walks away in 1992 to start Image Comics. Image Comics, all these creators, they created little kind of sub companies in there. He created Wildstorm, and Wildcats came out of that, his kind of X-Men, right? So Wildcats, or Wildstorm Comics, you had Cliffhanger Comics, I loved them. Wetworks was Will Portacio's, I believe. You had eventually Alan Moore shows up. He's got America's Best Comics. And then, so that's what they do. They've made their own sub-brand, right? And then these are my characters, I own them. Image puts this book out. And that's what it is. So they do that for a while, many successfully, a lot as a fluke. Because some of these comics, they produce all these foil covers, all these covers I'm telling you about, all these gimmicks. The art is so over the top, right? Oh, is issue 3? No, it's issue 3's late. Oh, is there an issue 4? Oh. That's the thing about know thyself. Some of you need a boss. Sorry. You can't work without a boss. You can't work without a deadline. You just can't seem to get the things you want to get done. Why is that? Because you need a boss. You need a mentor. I like having a mentor, okay? I seek out mentors. Someone that you want to go, hey, look at this. Is this good? And they go, that is really good, except for this and except for that. And you know this and that about you. Where they call you out on stuff so that you grow as a person. Having a mentor is very, very important, right? So some of these young artists, they fail. They do start a company, but they fail. They fail with their comics and with their works. And they don't make it to issue 3 or 4. And then they just start another, but I'm on issue 1 of this. We'll start this. And another bunch of sales. But that ball bounces lower and lower with every bounce, right? That is exactly correct. That's how it is. So the funny thing about all that is that Jim Lee was successful. He got his stuff out and always does. Todd McFarlane's successful. Eric Larson's successful. Creates Savage Dragon. They're successful. It's a few people like I brought up. Rob Liefeld doesn't exactly work out. I don't know how long Wetworks works out, and those characters aren't quite as memorable. But they go back. A few of them, Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee, go back to Marvel Comics in 1996. So they do a few different things, work on in 92, they work on a few of their own books. They get a taste of it for 4 years, and then they're like, oh, why don't we just, Marvel is trying to copy them and chasing their tail and failing. They've ruined all their books, ruined them. And they go, you know what we got to do? We need a reboot. So we're going to do Heroes Reborn. We're going to start it again. Oh, the Thing wasn't in Vietnam, he was in the Gulf War that I just told you about, right? Or Desert Storm, and then it becomes the Gulf War, and then it becomes what it is. That's what happens. They have to keep aging these characters to the most appropriate war, right? So they reboot the Fantastic Four, Avengers, and two other books, right? So Heroes Reborn is the Fantastic Four, Captain America, Iron Man, and the Avengers. So they get these creative, like, you know, instead of chasing them around, it's like, let's just hire them back. And they go, yeah, they paid them gobs of money. Those guys quit, went out and showed what they're worth, and then they got paid what they're worth. That's what they did from the corporation. It's ridiculous. So it is really something to be bold, take chances, believe in yourself, and go do things, because it was their art that was moving those books. It was not those characters. Those characters failed years later while those guys were gone, and they tried to chase what those guys were doing. And we got to reboot them. Let's get the guys that did it to reboot them. It doesn't work. So in continuity, they go, oh, we plucked you back from this other universe that you were. I feel like I remember it. Ugh, right? So then that goes on to, like, Marvel's just having problems. So they file bankruptcy around this time as well. And I told you about that in an earlier video. So what saves Marvel goes into the Steel Era, and it is the launch of Ultimate Comics. Let's start from number 1, and they're going to be more violent again. They're going to be grittier. It's going to be that, but we're starting from number 1. It works. The Ultimate Universe does launch and work, and that's what saves. It's Ultimate Spider-Man works. They got a good team, good writing, and it does save Marvel, like it really does as a comics company. And then the movies, thank goodness, this Spider-Man comes out. These movies come out and make them some scratch to keep them alive, and that's important. And I'll talk about all that media in like one of the last videos, all this media that it all changes everything as I've been talking. So let's go back to Jim Lee. So then he goes to Marvel, works there for a while, a couple years, and then goes back to Wildstorm for just a little bit and to do a couple projects. And then he sells Wildstorm, this thing he created and those characters, to DC Comics. He sells them to DC Comics in 1998. All right, and then he's brought on as, I believe, like a co-editor position. Okay, that happens at some point, or he works his way up to that. Then he makes Hush, the best Batman story of my lifetime when I was growing up. It really was the best. It was just and he drew it all. This is what kids grow up wanting to draw like, is Jim Lee. That's what Todd McFarlane did too. An entire generation of kids saw this art and said, oh, I want to draw comics. And they were that, and now they're the evolution of that. So you grow up on an entire, everything you look at is some of the best comics instead of what it was. It inspires a generation of different artists that then take some from that and then make their own changes. You have a lot of Jim Lee clones. You have some Todd McFarlane clones, a lot of them. But then they do grow and make into their own stuff and into their own things. But Jim Lee draws the best Batman, the iconic Batman story, and it's just so good. It's 12 issues, and then he follows that up. And he does that with Jeff Loeb, one of my favorite writers. Jeff Loeb's amazing. Ed McGuinness is my favorite artist. He's very cartoony, big, bulky, cartoony artist. He works on Superman with Jeff Loeb, does a story called Emperor Joker. I recommend it, all right? So you've got the next year he does a Superman story. It's not as good, but it's great. You know, it's not as good as the Batman one, because the Batman one was just like legend. And the Superman one's like, oh, that was really good, and that's all. It's not like it changed the world, right? So in 2010, he becomes a co-publisher, all right? And it's with Dan Didio, and just last year, Dan Didio got fired, and they're doing a whole shakeup at DC right now, again, as I've been telling you. And 2020, he's the sole publisher. Jim Lee is the sole publisher of DC Comics. What a career in comics. Isn't that something? That's ballsy. what you got to do to make it, but also knowing that you're working hard enough on your skill that you can back it up. A lot of people, a lot of Americans, as a fact, they can't back up what they think about themselves. They just think, oh yeah, it's easy. I think that they can watch a YouTube video or read a book or whatever. It's like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. It's this bravado. It's ego. And it's absurd because it's actually really hard to do all that and to do it on time and to get it done and be good at buildings and everything, to not have a flaw in your art, and you can draw anything. And again, since teaching this class, looking at comic panels, I'm like, I will never achieve this. You know, I've made some comics. I'm like, I will never achieve superhero comics. I never wanted to, but I'm like, really looking at more the depth of them. Like when it is like, God, look at all those buildings back there and those characters in the distance and this, and when they're flying toward them, and then this character there, and it's just amazing. And it is, remember, Jim Lee doesn't ink. Jim Lee doesn't do the lettering. Jim Lee is not worried about all the sound effects. Jim Lee is not coloring it. He doesn't have to think about that. He thinks about these pencils and that's it. So remember, a comic is a job of 5 to 6 to 7 people, right? So think of that when you are trying to make projects, because it takes a lot. It takes a lot to have the career of Jim Lee and to be so bold that you can take a chance, but back it up and be successful and make those deadlines. Deadlines are, the world is deadlines. You can't miss your deadlines. Make that the skill. I was telling someone that turned in a project at 11:59. It's having enough time to go back and reach and grab your hat like you pull an Indiana Jones. So it's a skill to have. It's a good skill to learn. Always being able to kind of make it. If you can make it right at the last minute, you made it. You turned in a bunch of stuff. You're done. You did it. That counts, right? So make that skill a skill. Deadlines. Don't miss deadlines. They're the most important lesson to learn from school. That's why they give you homework. It's not about the homework as much as it's about learn how to work on a schedule. Learn how to schedule yourself, because once you're out in the world, it's like, oh, I have to this. I watch my friends don't understand how to do laundry. They don't understand how to start taking care of themselves. They don't understand certain things and they can't think long term. I just never changed the oil. Well, why? Why didn't you change the oil in the car? You knew it had happened. Oh, I just didn't know how. I didn't know what to do. And then they don't do anything. It's ridiculous. I watch it all the time. So, really think about that. That's enough of that. I want to tell you about some of these covers that are the gimmicks that work for all of this time, right? So all of these different things, and during this era, this is why the bubble bursts. That bubble bursts because the collector's market dies. All of a sudden, they're printing all these chrome books, which are expensive to print. They're printing all these different books, Prisma books, holograms, all this stuff all over, right? And ordering millions of copies, and then the buyer drops off because your character, Ripclaw, is not as good as Wolverine. So yes, some of it might work for Wolverine, but you're not as good as that. It's not going to work, right? Shadowhawk, are you going to follow them all up? No, you didn't have them. But boy, you got a few colorful, shiny comic covers on it. That's it. And it ruined the industry, that collector's market. There's a billion issues of Superman Returns to Life because nobody wanted it. Him dying, that was a moment. They tried to recreate it. Nope, you can't recreate that sort of thing. It's hard to catch lightning in a bottle twice, right? They're making comics of the variant covers I told you about. Different covers, same book, all right? The gatefold cover, right? X-Men famously does the hologram cover, and that's when Wolverine gets all of his adamantium ripped out. Wolverine 75, go look it up. It's an excellent image, all right? You have the connected scene. That's that gatefold connect scene. You put them all together. Right? Die cut. They're cutting out the covers. It's Wolverine again. And he's slashing through the cover. Other people ripping the cover. The cover has a hole in it, bullet holes. They're just cutting it out, right? Prism, using that Prism like hologrammy stickers, right? Those stickers that are really glowy and shiny. So you're doing Prism ones. Polybag like the Superman. You got to open this bag. If you open that bag, boom. You have to do that. Glow in the dark. I told you about my glow in the dark Superman cover. That worked. Electric Superman. I bought them all, but that cover got me. Embossed covers where it is, oh, look at this. It's the tomb of Spider-Man's headstone. It's all bumpy, right? Bumpy embossed covers. Like that's a thing. There's the raised up. Gold foil, Silver Surfer in silver, Wolverine's claws in silver, making anything, Iron Man in silver, all of that shiny, shiny stuff. All right? And these are all great. It is. Sometimes they're really great. It's really fun, but don't think that you're going to do anything with it. That's why they're all at Bookman's for nothing. Modern times, you have blank covers are really fun because people like to draw on the blank covers. You have character cosplay. That's where you get Gwenpool. All the Marvel superheroes dressed like a version of Deadpool. So Spider-Woman, Spider-Gwen, that was her version of Deadpool. It was so popular, it became a character. They're like, we better make a story for this character because now she exists as a new character, right? That's how fashion dictates comics. All of these new designs will sometimes get a character right off the ground and be like, I want to see a comic about that guy. What's that one's backstory? And it works. And it's just a fashion show. People want cool. It just works. They want something that looks good. That's why your iconic superheroes work. If someone looks stupid, they look stupid. It's odd. The red underwear doesn't look stupid on Superman to a lot of people, right? To me, him with nothing there, with the weird full blue, that's weird. I like a difference between pants and shirt. So you have music parodies they were doing, so just full parody covers of like, here's a famous album cover, and all the Marvel superheroes are doing different album covers. You have a company-wide theme, when Enough Said, that's a theme where no one talks, so everyone's on the covers doing that, like shushing or doing something where it's quiet. And then DC did one of the worst ones ever, where it's all the characters taking selfies. It's all selfie view on their covers. And the Wonder Woman Superman one, I hate it so much. And the Superman and Batman one is him forcing Batman to smile, and it's one of the weirdest things ever. So it's really nuts. So they still do the comic covers to this day, and it still works. And some of them are still, we only produced this many of this one. There's the ultimate Spider-Man white cover that's supposedly very rare because comic stores only got one version of that for every 500 issues or 1,000 issues of Ultimate Spider-Man they ordered or something. It's like, what? Yep. So all about doing that enticement. So luckily, Marvel crawled out of bankruptcy because of their movies and because of the media and because of Ultimate Universe working, selling those books, getting some mainstream attention, bringing themselves back up and becoming worth millions of dollars again, and then billions of dollars again, because that's what they're bought for, billions of dollars. Because I'll say it every time. I don't know if I'll say it later. Disney bought their character library, their 5,000 character library. They do not care about whatever. They look at it like that. So they can be like, oh, Gwenpool's popular? How much history does she have? Not too much. Let's make a Gwenpool movie. She's really hot right now. Like Big Hero 6, I brought it up. We can mess with it. No one's going to be like, that's not how it works. That's what it is. What else 90s before I go dashing on off? Again, the rise of Wolverine, obviously. Some of that's because of his height. Don't be fooled by Hugh Jackman. It's because Wolverine was like 5 foot. All right, he's less ethical. He's tough. He's mean. X-Men being the most popular comic to this day. Those 8 million copies were in an accident. You have a lot of, again, the X-Men are practically its own universe. You have your favorite superhero and then you have your favorite X-Men, right? You just do because they have so many sub-characters. It's rarely, oh, my favorite X-Men is the guy, right? It's Wolverine. It's a lot of it's like, I actually like Havoc, or I actually like Beast or Iceman, or my favorite is Multiple Man. You know, they have a favorite like side X-Men, like that's the thing. So you have Wolverine here by Restraint, X-Men selling all those copies of stuff. Todd McFarlane just bringing art into the modern times. The Death of Superman, phenomenal. Image, the R-rated comic. Oh yeah, basically Image was we could be R-rated. They never cared about a comics code ever. That's why Spawn is murdering people because he's like not doing the Batman thing, which they kind of address in a recent Batman story, Joker War. I just kind of finished watching things on, where it's Batman and Joker, Batman versus the Joker, the old song and dance, but they always make it good, don't they? It's always this mental battle between the Joker and Batman. Like just this, because he knows he's Bruce Wayne. It's not even about that anymore. He's just torturing this man who he's fascinated with. That's some of the Joker. It's just interesting. So yeah, that's the 90s. It's a big attitude era. X-Men is like a high school. That's a good way to describe it. X-Men's like a high school. So everyone really related to it because it's school. They're all teenagers. So again, you got your teenage heroes that people relate to. They understand that. They understand going to school, having the guy in charge, all that sort of thing, right? And just how cool would it be? How cool would it be? So people live vicariously through the X-Men. So yeah, the 90s is just great. It really is. Comics really kind of lay the foundation for the way we still see them now, even with those big companies, Kickstarter being the newest addition to changing the way comics work, with now being able to crowdfund comics, digital comics becoming a thing, because again, digital comics did not exist yet. They really did not exist yet. I start getting America Online discs. America goes Mainstream internet. The internet goes mainstream in 1995. Okay, that's when those America Online discs are getting sent to every household. And you get this many hours for free and this many that. Free internet, and now you start getting fan sites built, and you start getting this stuff starting to happen. And this is what fandom starts to grow. Remember, I said earlier I couldn't order a Spider-Man shirt at the time. Yep, in 1992 probably, when I first started collecting comics, you couldn't get a Spider-Man shirt anywhere. I had to special order it from Previews magazine at the comic store, and then like designer Spider-Man within 10 years of that, right? It's bonkers, and that's only grown and grown and grown. Bonkers what happens. I love it. I just do. Man, it's almost like I put off the 90s one because I was just so looking forward to it, and it's almost like, oh man, like it's Christmas. You know, there are some pinnacle stories in the 90s, but a lot of them are the Clone Saga, which fails. The Death of Superman, which is early and then becomes the cliche. The Knights and Batman, which was in one of those videos that I posted. Again, I hope you're watching those videos because it helps me not have to do that. Go look at what that new Batman, armor Batman. Everyone's in armor. It's ridiculous. How's Iron Man gonna stand out? So you have all that happening in comics, and I love crossover events. Remember, complaining about crossover events is a thing, but sometimes they work. A summer event is fun. It makes all your characters interact with different villains and different heroes, and things do change. So you have to read it, because if you don't, you did miss it. So as much as they're able to sell whatever they want to kids on covers, get them to buy anything, tricking them, this is going to be worth millions, everybody. You know, you can always do it. Buy it now, the collector's edition, the one once in a lifetime. Just keep it sealed. Buy 2, buy 3. I have a Color Forms comic. Color Forms is back. That's, again, little vinyl stickers on a scene. So they did a merge with Milestone Comics, which, again, that is important because you have Milestone Comics, and that's where we get Static Shock. So some of your extra awesome black characters that live forever, that are really building a foundation. That, again, DC buys them. That company gets brought in there. Now Static Shock's part of the DC universe. A few other characters part of the DC universe. It's just insane. That's what's always happened. Every superhero just gets gobbled up into that. It's crazy. Comic sales now are so bad. 8 million copies back then, setting records. Now I think the number one book is lucky to sell 200,000 copies, I believe. Now remember, digital comics exist, so they might be getting digital dollars too. But it is that. They know that they got to keep cranking these stories out, because if the stories stop, the media will stop too. Because the media is always based on a good story that happens. And it is comics that always prop up superheroes and keep them alive until the media catches up again. Video games are, of course, now the biggest thing too for comics. And again, the characters, because that's what it's about. But remember, this is the history of comic books and the graphic novels. So I'm only going to touch on all that media stuff in the last bit because it affects everything. But this is about this specific industry and how it has always just remained this thing. And if you don't get in, you eventually just get out. You're just not a part of the superhero world anymore, I guess. Well, I mean, I'm done with it. And if I don't do it, it's done. And this company's going to reprint it forever and then make him a DC character and let other people do it. And then he's fighting alongside Superman. He gets to meet Superman. Think of that. You know how I believe in characters. Imagine someone offers you the opportunity for you. Say your characters that you haven't worked on, you're not going to work on because now you're kind of done and whatever. Like Jim Henson sells the Muppets to Disney because he wanted them to be in good hands, but, you know, ultimately he was a little disappointed. And other people sell their properties to Disney, George Lucas, not because of the money, because like, I want someone to take care of this. You know, I can't do it anymore. I'm not going to do it. It's going to outlive me. I recognize what it is in the cultural zeitgeist. So I'm going to pass it on. You know, I'm going to go buy into this company or give it to that company. So you never know, because it's pretty enticing. Whatever money they offer, sure. But it's also, and we're going to make sure that Invincible's in the Justice League. You know, like that's insane to think about. Imagine that offer. We're going to take your character and we're going to put, you know, I have an anthropomorphic panda. It's so popular. Warner Bros. Wants it. We want to buy the rights to it. We're going to make him a Looney Tune officially. We're going to put him in the history. We're going to do this. He counts as the Looney Tunes. And that means later on, if it was just a fad or it was just a thing, he'll still be in the background of the third basketball movie in 20 years, you know? Michael Jordan the third. that's that, and he'll be in there because now he's just a Looney Tune. So maybe he's not the most popular thing, but now he's part of the gang because that's part of the promise. So it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to think about. And again, that's why it's called selling out, and that's why they say it. I bought in. It's a different belief system. Selling out, you always hear about that. Again, musicians famously, mostly, because their first album's great, and then they get studio produced, and they learn, and they try to reach a broader demographic. It's like, all right, you reach this high with this. You want to reach everybody because now everybody's looking and listening. You got to make it this way now. It's like, oh, change with the times. It's a fact. So always be ready to evolve, and always think about where you keep yourself on the spectrum of creativity and how you are. Like I said, some of you have a character you love, and some of you just want to be a cog in the company. You can be Chris Claremont, who did write the X-Men for 17 years, right? That was for a company. So there's all these different ways to do it, but there's nothing to it but to do it. So that's the idea. So that's pretty much good 90s stuff. If I think of anything else, I'll throw them up in different videos. I'll find them there on the internet for you. But yeah, this was the best, honestly. It really was. And now we're gonna get into modern times, and I'll bring you up to speed with that. And then we start talking about media, and then we're gonna wrap it up. Class update. I got so impressed by what I asked you to do for that 5-page paper, where it was, I want to see these characters evolve with all these kooky ways, and you all certainly picked up what I'm trying to put down. So I appreciate that. I gave out a lot of perfect scores. So that's great. I really did enjoy that. Collector cards, and I loved all the Silver Age first pages so much. It was really good. It's fun to have an idea, like it is an art project, and wow, look at it coming to fruition, just like you wanted with some people. And I'm really proud of this class and proud of you guys who who you are, and even some of you that are having a tough time. You're trying hard. The ones that are trying hard, I know you're trying hard, and I appreciate it. So keep it up, and let's go finish this out nice and strong, making good fun comic art, and really just enjoying comic books as we get into your time, your modern times for comics, and the most equal comics, and comics that are just a whole new standard of a way to deliver messages about people, stories, race, religion, everything. It's just really something special and it's a good time to be reading comics. There's a lot of creativity going on, and you're next. So you better start making those good creative comics. Woo!